People have changed, and it is actually terrifying. Not in a horror movie way, in a quieter, more statistical way. The kind of terrifying that shows up in a peer-reviewed survey instead of a jump scare. This is Wealth Records, and today we are documenting exactly how much people have changed. Not vaguely, not with vibes, with actual numbers from actual researchers. Let's start with friendship, because friendship has quietly collapsed. In 1990, 33% of Americans said they had 10 or more close friends. By 2021, that number had fallen to 13%. 33% down to 13% in roughly one generation. Something happened to friendship, and it did not happen slowly enough to notice. Now, let's talk about men specifically, because men got hit considerably harder. In 1990, 3% of American men reported having no close friends at all. By 2021, that number had risen to 15%, a fivefold increase in 3 decades, among men specifically. Picture a room of 20 men. In 1990, roughly none of them would have 0 friends. Today, 3 of them would. Nobody announced this. Nobody sent a memo. It simply happened, quietly, everywhere. Now let's talk about civic life, because friendship is only part of the collapse. Membership in community organizations has fallen sharply since the mid-20th century. Bowling leagues, church groups, parent-teacher associations, local clubs of every kind. People are not simply avoiding friends. They are avoiding rooms full of other people entirely. Political meetings, union halls, volunteer groups, all measurably thinner than they once were. This matters because these rooms were never really about the stated activity. Nobody joined a bowling league purely for the bowling. The bowling was the excuse. The actual product was proximity, repeated, low stakes, unplanned contact with other humans. Remove the excuse to gather, and the gathering itself quietly disappears too. Now let's talk about trust specifically, because trust has its own separate collapse. Surveys asking whether most people can be trusted have shown a long, steady decline. Decades ago, a clear majority answered yes. Today, that majority has vanished. People increasingly assume strangers mean them harm, rather than assuming good faith. This produces a specific, exhausting vigilance in everyday interactions. The neighbor is a suspect before they are a neighbor. The stranger is a threat first. Trust, once assumed by default, is now something you have to individually earn. Multiply that exhausting negotiation across every interaction in an entire day. It is not surprising people increasingly retreat to the fewer relationships they already trust. Now let's talk about the specific number that should genuinely alarm you. 12% of Americans currently report having no close friends whatsoever. 12%, up from 3% in 1990, a quadrupling. 1 in 8 adults, with nobody they would specifically call a close friend. This is not a niche experience. This is a structural, documented national shift. Now let's talk about dating specifically, because romantic connection followed the same slope. Fewer young adults are forming long-term relationships at the ages previous generations did. Marriage rates have fallen. Dating app usage has risen. These are not unrelated facts. Dating apps promised efficiency. What they delivered, for many users, was exhaustion. An infinite scroll of potential partners produces something researchers call choice overload. More options do not produce more satisfaction. Past a certain point, they produce paralysis. Swiping through hundreds of profiles trains the brain to treat people as disposable options, rather than as specific individuals worth the effort of actually getting to know. The efficiency the apps promised came at the cost of the patience relationships actually require. Now let's talk about young people, because this is the part that breaks the pattern. You would assume loneliness belongs to the elderly, the isolated grandparent. The data says the opposite. Loneliness is now primarily a young person's condition. Roughly 6 in 10 young adults aged 18 to 25 report serious loneliness. Compare that to adults over 65. Where the number drops considerably. The loneliest people in America are not old, they are young, and online, constantly. Now let's talk about screen time. Because the maths here writes its own punchline. Americans now spend more than 7 hours per day looking at screens. 7 hours? That time has to come from somewhere. It is not manufactured from nothing. It is coming, overwhelmingly, from the exact hours that used to be face-to-face socializing. You did not lose your friends. You traded them for a glowing rectangle. Slowly. Now let's talk about the health consequence, because this part is genuinely serious. Now let's talk about parasocial relationships, because this is a genuinely strange one. A parasocial relationship is a one-sided bond you form with someone who does not know you exist, a streamer, a podcaster, a creator you watch for hours every single week. Researchers have documented a measurable rise in people describing these bonds as genuinely close. Some viewers report feeling closer to a specific online personality than to actual friends. This is not a personal failing. It is a predictable response to genuine loneliness. A parasocial relationship offers warmth, familiarity, and companionship on demand. Without the specific vulnerability, scheduling difficulty, or risk of rejection real friendship requires. The problem is that a parasocial relationship, by definition, cannot actually be reciprocated. You can watch someone for 1,000 hours. They will never once notice you exist. That is not a relationship. It is a very convincing simulation of one, and it is spreading. A major meta-analysis found that loneliness carries a health risk comparable to smoking. Specifically, comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Read that again. Being lonely is now measured against a pack of cigarettes. Nobody puts a warning label on isolation. Perhaps they should. Now let's talk about social media specifically, because the data is remarkably blunt. The U.S. Surgeon General's advisory cited research on heavy social media use directly. People using social media more than 2 hours daily reported roughly double the isolation, compared to people using it for less than 30 minutes, more scrolling, more isolation. Not despite the scrolling, because of it. Now let's talk about emotional connection specifically, because this number stings. Only 39% of American adults say they feel very connected to others. 39%. Meaning the majority does not feel genuinely emotionally connected. This is not a mental health statistic about a small vulnerable group. This is the majority experience, quietly, nationally, right now. Now let's talk about remote work, because this deserves its own separate mention. Remote and hybrid work arrangements expanded dramatically following the global pandemic. The convenience is genuinely real. The commute disappears. The flexibility genuinely helps. But the office, whatever else it was, also functioned as an accidental social institution. The coffee machine conversation, the quarter chat, the lunch nobody specifically planned. These interactions were never scheduled. They simply happened because proximity made them happen. Remove the shared physical space, and you remove the accidental social contact that came with it. People now have to deliberately schedule the exact interactions that used to happen automatically. And deliberately scheduling social contact is, for most people, considerably more effort, which means for a large number of remote workers, it simply does not happen at the same rate. Now let's talk about why this happened, because it did not happen by accident. Researchers point to several converging forces, not one single villain. Long working hours leave considerably less energy for maintaining friendships properly. Geographic mobility scatters people away from the social networks they actually built. Later marriage delays the traditional expansion of social circles that marriage once provided. Over-reliance on workplace friendships creates vulnerability the moment a job changes. In social media, the newest force promised connection and delivered something thinner. Commenting on a photo is not sitting across a table from someone. It never was. It just felt for a while like it might be close enough. It was not close enough. Now let's talk about the specific neuroscience, because this part explains the spiral. Now let's talk about empathy specifically, because researchers have tracked this directly. Studies measuring self-reported empathy among young adults have found a documented decline. Comparing cohorts across several decades, later groups scored measurably lower on empathy scales. Researchers specifically point to reduced face-to-face interaction as a leading contributing factor. Empathy is not simply an innate trait you either have or lack permanently from birth. It is partly a skill, built through repeated practice reading another person's actual face, their pauses, their hesitation, their small unplanned expressions that a screen cannot transmit. Remove the practice, and the skill measurably weakens, the same way any unused skill does. This is not proof that people have become worse humans. It is proof of reduced repetition. The muscle atrophies specifically because it is being used considerably less often. Chronic loneliness makes people more sensitive to perceived social threats. Researchers found lonely individuals become more likely to interpret interactions negatively, reading rejection into situations that were never actually rejecting anyone. Social rejection activates the brain's threat detection center, the amygdala. The same pathway that responds to physical pain responds to social rejection. Loneliness does not simply feel bad. It is processed, neurologically, like an injury. And the specific cruelty is that loneliness makes new connection considerably harder. The lonelier you become, the more your own brain sabotages the next attempt at closeness. This is not a personal failing. This is a well-documented self-reinforcing loop. Now let's talk about men again, specifically, because the emotional support gap is stark. Only 21% of men reported getting emotional support from a friend recently. Compare that to 41% of women, almost double. Men are not simply friendless more often. They are also less likely to lean on the friends they do have. This produces a specific quiet isolation that rarely shows up loudly in public. It shows up instead in withdrawal, in silence, in "I'm fine" repeated until nobody checks again. Now let's talk about what actually happened to Robert Putnam's famous thesis. Now let's talk about the workplace specifically, because work friendships deserve their own mention. A large share of adults report that most of their social contact happens specifically at work. This creates a fragile arrangement because workplace relationships depend entirely on the job continuing. Change jobs, get laid off, or simply move teams, and an entire social circle can vanish overnight. Previous generations built social lives across multiple separate institutions simultaneously. Church, neighborhood, extended family living nearby, clubs unrelated to their employer entirely. Modern social life has increasingly consolidated into a single fragile point of failure: the job. When that single point fails, there's frequently no backup structure left standing behind it. This is precisely why job loss now correlates so strongly with sudden, severe social isolation. It is not simply the lost income. It is the lost social infrastructure that came attached to it. In the year 2000, Putnam published a book called Bowling Alone. He documented Americans joining fewer clubs, fewer bowling leagues, fewer civic groups. People were bowling considerably more than before, just increasingly alone. That book is now considerably more relevant than when it was originally written. The specific bowling leagues have been replaced by considerably more screens. The isolation Putnam warned about did not reverse. It simply found new delivery methods. Now, let's talk about what this all adds up to, because the pattern is genuinely consistent. Fewer close friends, more screen time, more loneliness, especially among the young, a health risk comparable to smoking, a brain that reinterprets closeness as threat, and an entire structural shift that happened gradually enough that no single year felt dramatic. This is precisely why it feels, subjectively, like people simply changed. Because they did. Measurably. Documented. Across multiple independent research bodies. Now let's talk about the honest complication, because certainty here would be dishonest. Some researchers push back specifically on how dramatic the male friendship decline actually is. More recent polling from Pew found a considerably smaller gap between men and women. Roughly 9% of men and 8% of women reporting no close friends. Both genders report averaging around 5 close friends in that particular survey. This does not erase the broader trend. It complicates the specific magnitude of it. Different survey methodologies produce meaningfully different specific numbers. The broader direction, decline, especially among younger adults, remains consistently documented. The exact size of the male-specific gap remains, genuinely, an actively debated question. Now let's talk about children specifically, because the pattern starts earlier than adulthood. Unsupervised, unstructured outdoor play among children has declined significantly over decades. Researchers point to increased screen availability, increased scheduling, and increased parental caution. Children today spend measurably less time simply playing outside with other children, unsupervised. That unstructured play was never just play. It was where children practiced negotiation, where they learned to resolve small conflicts without an adult immediately intervening to fix it. Remove the unsupervised practice, and the negotiation skill has considerably less opportunity to develop. This means the friendship recession is not simply an adult phenomenon happening to adults. It may, in part, be the delayed downstream effect of a childhood that practiced connection less. An entire pipeline, starting in childhood, quietly narrowing the specific skills adulthood depends on. Now, let's talk about the global picture, because this is not purely an American phenomenon. Similar friendship and trust declines have been documented across the United Kingdom, across Canada, Australia, and several wealthy European nations, measured over the same decades. The specific numbers vary slightly by country. The underlying direction is remarkably consistent. Wealthy, heavily digitized societies across multiple continents are converging on the same pattern. This consistency across different cultures, languages, and political systems is genuinely instructive. It suggests the cause is not a single national policy failure unique to any one specific country. It suggests something structural, tied to technology and modern life itself, operating broadly, regardless of which particular government happens to be in office in any given nation. Now let's talk about what actually helps, because this channel does not end on despair. Research on friendship consistently finds one specific factor predicts resilience against loneliness. Believing friendship requires effort rather than luck predicts considerably less loneliness later. People who treat connection as something you build rather than something that happens to you consistently report better outcomes across multiple longitudinal studies. This means the fix is not romantic. It is mechanical, deliberate, slightly unglamorous. Scheduling time with people, repeatedly, even when scrolling would be easier in the moment. Choosing proximity, actual physical proximity, over the convenient substitute of a notification. Now, let's talk about the specific data on solitude versus loneliness, because they are not the same. Solitude, chosen deliberately, is genuinely associated with creativity and psychological restoration. Loneliness, the unwanted absence of connection, is associated with the opposite outcomes entirely. The distinction matters because modern life often disguises loneliness as a lifestyle choice. Living alone has become considerably more common across nearly every wealthy country measured. Living alone is not inherently a problem. Many people living alone report genuine contentment. The problem arrives specifically when living alone is paired with an absence of outside connection. A person can live alone and be deeply socially embedded, or live with others and feel entirely isolated. The actual variable that matters is connection, not the specific number of people under one roof. Now let's close properly, because 20 minutes of decline statistics deserves a proper landing. People have changed. The data supports that claim without requiring any exaggeration. Friendship shrank, loneliness grew. Screens expanded to fill exactly the gap that opened. This is genuinely, statistically terrifying, in the specific sense that public health data can be terrifying. It is also, importantly, not permanent, not biological, and not mysterious. It is behavioral, which means it is mechanically reversible, given deliberate effort. The terrifying part is the scale of the shift. The hopeful part is the mechanism behind it. Behavior that changed once can, with deliberate, unglamorous effort, change again. It's not magic. It's just math nobody walked you through. The math of how friendship collapsed by half in one generation, why loneliness now hits the young hardest, and why the fix, however unglamorous, is entirely within reach. One more thing, worth saying plainly before this ends, because it matters. None of this data means you personally are broken, or behind, or permanently doomed. It means an entire generation is navigating a structural shift together at the same time. Naming the shift accurately is the first step. The second step is considerably more boring. Text the specific friend. Schedule the specific coffee. Show up to the specific room. The unglamorous, deliberate, slightly effortful version of connection that actually works. Not because you are lazy, because the entire environment quietly stopped requiring it of you. Hit subscribe. Wealth Records. The pattern is always there if you know where to look. I do. If any of this feels heavier than a general observation about the world, please talk to someone you trust.